You can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine. Sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time. Cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis man, cannabis man, cannabis man. Spreading news and joy across the land. Diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis man, they're all keen.
Hello there, and welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Thank you for clicking on the show. I am your host, Don Kleppen. And however you're listening to this, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, really appreciate you giving it a listen. If you would be so kind as to leave a rating or review, that would be lovely and most welcome. This is a show where we're trying to take a more journalistic look at legal cannabis. I'm a broadcaster in Chicago. I've been doing radio news for a little over a decade now, and I'm a personal cannabis user of going on about 20 years, as uncomfortable as that makes me say to say out loud. That's about how long I've been using this plant for various issues. The main one for me was getting to sleep at night. That was something I'd struggled with all through my young life, and I found when my friends introduced me to cannabis after high school, I found that in addition to just kind of enjoying the social vibe at parties, I found that I was sleeping great the nights afterward, and so that led me to keeping cannabis as kind of a part of my regular routine through the years. And as a broadcaster, as somebody that, follows the news and interviews people and tries to parse more complex topics and follow things that I think people should be knowing about, I was really excited when cannabis became legal recreationally here in Illinois, as well as, medically in other states around the U.S. and around the world at large. This green frontier is expanding every day. But the conversations really have not evolved in terms of mainstream media. And what I mean by that is that you still see a lot of the same Cheech and Chong jokes and punchlines and really the remnants of last century's propaganda, and that just furthers the lingering stigma around this plant that people have been using for literally thousands of years and has only been prohibited in its current status for about the last 100. We're still about 12 years away from that. 1937 was when the cannabis plant was prohibited in earnest. So we have a lot more history using this plant than we have in its current prohibition. And so my point is, I wanted to bring the types of conversations that I had with other stoners and connoisseurs, if you like. I wanted to bring those conversations to a more mainstream platform, make them accessible to other people, and thus this podcast was born a few years ago. And in that time, it has become one of the top podcasts out there. There are well over 5 million now that are recognized in existence. And many of them apparently never make it past like episode 10, and then there's another threshold at episode 40. So I'm sitting here now, this is episode, it's over 100. I've kind of lost track, to be honest with you, but I do feel really good about that, and it's gotten some great reception around the world. It's reached almost 90 countries now, almost 1,700 cities around the world. And I think more importantly, it's been recognized as one of the top cannabis podcasts out there, as well as indie news and society and culture by the platform Good Pods, and Listen Notes, which is kind of a ranking podcast engine. They recognize it as one of the top podcasts in existence. So that really makes me feel good. I really appreciate the reception. And the goal of this is to bring expert conversations to you. I also follow news. I'll give you some headlines. I'll review some products, tell you stuff that I think is worth you checking out, as well as stuff I think you should avoid. But most importantly, it's the information that I get in my conversations with experts in the field. Whether these are doctors prescribing it medically, if these are scientists doing research in labs, answering questions about the plant and all of its cannabinoids and terpenes and all of the new information we're getting every single day. I'll also talk with entrepreneurs who are creating goods or services, growers, politicians, whether they're elected or appointed to create or enforce cannabis laws, which are likely going to be the foundation for legal cannabis going forward. And I'll also talk with other, media people, journalists in the space who are covering this plant as we are moving further and further, as I say, into this green frontier and kind of re-exploring really this territory where cannabis is hopefully, as we move forward, a more accepted and normalized part of our society. As I said, cannabis can help with a whole host of issues, and my guest today has a story of survival. It's a pretty harrowing story, and this guy is still in the midst of his recovery from a brainstem stroke that he suffered just about 2 years ago at the end of this month, May of 2025, when this episode comes out. That's the 2-year anniversary from when he had his stroke. And his recovery still continues. It's definitely still going along. As he says himself, it's not a linear journey. Not all days are the same. It's not just it's a complete step upward. That's not the way it goes. Anybody who's recovered from a major event like that will tell you the same thing. But I want to share his story because I think it's a powerful message. It also is really important in terms of the larger discussion about cannabis at large and the role that it can play in recovery and healthcare. My guest is Ian McGann, and he's going to talk about his journey and the role that cannabis played in his life before this health event, as well as during his recovery and in the days since. I've also got a product to tell you about and some news headlines that I want to share with you that I think are worth your attention. So without further ado, let's crack this episode open. It's the Cannabis Man Podcast.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis Broadcast.
Here we are back into the show properly. I hope you enjoy both of those opening theme songs. The second one was my original theme that was written and composed by my friend Yusu Kim, aka Good Son. He is a traveling musician, also somebody who recently welcomed a child into his family. That would be Kobe. So hoping that Yusu, Joanna, and Kobe are all doing very, very well. And I am recording this episode on May 14th of 2025, which is 3 days after Mother's Day of this year, which was May 11th. And so I just wanted to wish a happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I say this as often as is warranted, I suppose, which you really can't say it enough. We all owe everything to our mothers, and we literally wouldn't be here without them, and we'd have nothing. And so, however life is going, not all days are great, no matter what your existence is like, but Mother's Day only comes once a year, but every day, I think it's important to be grateful for the moms out there. So a big shout out to my mom, Lori, and Lolo to Violet. She has been just really supportive ever since Violet has come into our lives. And I want to shout out my wife, Gretchen, who always does a great job every day of taking care of Violet, of supporting our family, and just she has stepped into that role of mother more gracefully and more naturally than I ever expected. And so I just want to give a shout out to them as well as the other mothers out there for doing everything you do for us every single day. And the days have been getting warmer out there. We are rapidly approaching summer. I don't know where you are around the world, listener, but here in Chicago, it has been, the temperatures have been so warm that the lake has really formed this fog and mist around it for the last couple of days. You really can't see much of anything. Our building is right on the edge of the water, and for the last 2 days, it's like we're living in a cloud because you just cannot see anything out the windows except for the white mist and the bright light of the sun that's shining off of it, which has made for some interesting indoor temperatures for us, to say the least. But gotta love the approach of summer. It's always wonderful to know that soon you'll be able to do all the things you love to do outside. A lot of summertime activities everybody looks forward to every year. Barbecues, family get-togethers, the 4th of July is coming up. A lot of day drinking, just outside drinking or smoking. Just the freedom to be able to be outside and enjoy nature in the warmth. That's something I think is always welcome and just fun in the summertime, and it's so nice to be approaching that right now. I hope you've been able to enjoy a little bit of that too. Something I have been enjoying this week is a product from my friends at Extract Labs. They're doing some really great work finding out exactly how terpenes are playing a role in our experience with various cannabis products. Not just the smell of it, but how we actually process the various strains of flower or whatever cannabis product you're consuming, it is finally becoming a bit more widely understood how important a role that terpenes play in our experience with cannabis products. For so long, I always joke on the show, it was just broken into indica or sativa, and people knew, THC and CBD in terms of cannabinoids. But now that, it's been legalized and we're learning more about this plant, people are understanding there are hundreds of cannabinoids, and some of the minor ones can play major roles, those being things like CBG, THCV, CBN. Those can sort of impact your experience, and the terpenes and the terpene profile of various strains also greatly impact how you feel and the vibe that you get when you consume that cannabis product. And so Extract Labs is doing more to kind of further our understanding of that, and I'm going to be chatting with their CEO coming up here in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to bringing that conversation to you. But they were kind enough to send some gummies. In addition to, finding out about these terpenes and kind of what they do, they're also making some really great products. And so they sent me some of their sour apple, and then today I am trying for the first time, live with you right now, I'm trying their strawberry gummies. I just opened up the jar, and you probably heard that little pop. That was me getting through the tin foil or aluminum foil layer that, protects underneath the cap when you twist it open. This has one of those protective layers on it. These strawberry gummies, this jar has 1,500 milligrams total of THC and CBD. Actually, let me correct that. It has 1,500 milligrams of CBD, and it has around 53 milligrams of THC, spread across 30 vegan gummies. These are sugar-free, and this bottle specifically highlights the CBD element of these gummies, full spectrum, daily support. And on the nutrition label along the back, you see it's got 5 grams of total carbohydrates, including 1 gram of total sugars, and full spectrum hemp extract of 73 milligrams per serving, along with 50 milligrams of CBD. So, cheers to you. I hope you're able to enjoy some of the beautiful summer weather. Hope you're getting some sunshine, some time spent in nature. No matter what else is going on, I find a little shot of nature goes a long way toward helping you process some stuff and just kind of get through your day, helps you with mental health and your mood overall. I talk a lot on the show about exercise and meditation and that kind of stuff, but just taking a walk sometimes out in nature along a lakefront, in a forest preserve trail, just getting yourself a little shot of green, and I mean that in all senses, of course, can go a long way toward helping you feel better. So cheers. Hope you're feeling good. Oh yeah. Strawberry really comes through strong on the first bite. That's really nice. Now, what's interesting about these Extract Lab gummies, even though they're sugar-free, they still have the granules along the outsides of the gummies. And I think I know why they do that, to prevent the gummies from sticking together. When they ship these to wherever you are, the granules help the gummies from sort of just congealing together. Whatever the temperature is, when they're just stuck together, they can just form one of those gelatinous masses. The granules here really help that not happen. They also, I like the granules on a gummy. I've had many gummies now over the course of this show, and I tend to enjoy the ones with granules more than the ones without. That being said, you can overdo it, and I feel like they have found a good balance with Extract Labs products here. There weren't too many of the granules, and it's not too sweet. Again, sugar-free. And looking at the jar here, their ingredients include a pectin base, which if you've listened to the show at all, I'm wild about the pectin-based gummies. I definitely prefer those over gelatin. I just think that it makes the biting and chewing experience so much more indulgent. So you can look forward to that with these Extract Labs gummies. And, the strawberry is still the flavor is still pleasantly hanging around. It's pretty strong in that first bite, but it fades nicely. And then there is a little bit of the bite of infusion. It's not overpowering, and the strawberry's lingering more than that infusion taste. Erythritol, which I believe is the sugar substitute that they're using to kind of give you that sweetness. There's also allulose, I might be saying that wrong, and water coconut oil, and some other stuff too. So not a lot, though. There's not a lot on there that, that you sometimes see on processed foods that you can't pronounce. There's not too many of those, even though I just struggled to say something. I'm going to put that on me more than them. I think this is the kind of nutrition label I like to see, in that there aren't too many. It's not a long list of ingredients. So that speaks well toward just kind of a more naturalistic product. But I'll let you know how the vibe goes from these strawberry ones. The sour apple ones I tried the other night, I really enjoyed that vibe. I'm also sipping on some coffee here. If you've heard the show before, you might have heard me say how much I love combining caffeine and cannabis, one of my absolute favorite substance combinations. I've heard people refer to it as a hippie speedball before. That's kind of fun to say. But either way, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon, kind of the early afternoon, like right now, it's a little after 3:15 when I'm talking to you. I find that, the caffeine and cannabis combo is really just the sort of vibe that I prefer to cultivate. Another great vibe from a product I want to mention before I get into my guest interview this week is another gummy from my friends at Tribe Tokes. I talked about their vape battery and their carts. Those are fabulous. And I believe I might have told you about some of their other gummies, but the one I want to tell you about now are their sleep formula gummies. These things do the job so wonderfully. Not only do you get the CBN and the CBD in there, they had the genius inspiration, and I call it that because I think it is really innovative. They also threw in some tryptophan, which, if you don't know what that is the substance in turkey meat that makes everybody sleepy after a Thanksgiving meal. Now, if you're outside of America and, you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, that's just fine. But if you've ever eaten turkey and you felt that sleepy sensation afterwards, that's the tryptophan. And that can be found in these Tribe Tokes sleep formula gummies. So you get the Delta-9 THC in there, you get your CBN, and you add the sleepy tryptophan on top of it. I'm telling you, I had one of these the other night, and I just knocked out within about 35 minutes, which is exactly what I was looking for. Slept wonderfully through the night, and woke refreshed the next day. Now, maybe that'll be your experience, maybe not, but I'm somebody that's always interested in cannabis products that can help me sleep, get to sleep, and stay asleep at night. And I gotta say, I've tried a lot of CBN, different gummies, different drinks, that kind of stuff. The spectrum in terms of how effective they are is wide. Not every product is as well made as these Tribe Tokes gummies are. But these ones, for my money, knocked it out of the park in terms of the exact vibe and effect that I was seeking, and they delivered it. So you can check those out at tribetokes.com. Look for the sleep formula gummies. And let me know if it doesn't do the trick. Now, before I get into my guest interview this week, I do want to let you know, as I mentioned at the top, Ian shares his journey of recovery, and he talks about the stroke, and he gets into some pretty explicit detail. We don't dwell on it. I don't want you to think that we're just sitting here discussing, bodily functions and just kind of, playing with shocking material. That's not at all what I do here. But I wanted Ian to be open and honest and share his story, and credit to him, he was comfortable going pretty deep into what his experience was like. But I'm just giving you a sort of a heads up before we get into this. If bodily functions, or if, sort of explicit description of when somebody is having an episode like the stroke that Ian suffered, if that description kind of, gives you the heebie-jeebies, or it's not your cup of tea, you may want to skip a little bit later into the interview. We talked for about 55 minutes, so it's a long one. There's plenty in there, and we kind of go through the explicitness of what he went through early on. So I think if you skip a few minutes in, you should be covered, but I just wanted to give you that heads up so it didn't, hit you unexpectedly. Now, on to the conversation. My guest today has a fascinating story to tell, and if you've listened to this show at all before, you know that I'm very passionate about not just normalizing cannabis as it becomes legalized around society, but also informing and educating people about the potential that it offers as a plant, whether to help you with some minor quality of life issues that you might be dealing with, or some major ones. And our guest today has a really great story in terms of the healing power of of cannabis. We have talked on the show with people who have had all kinds of issues all across the spectrum medically, and cannabis has helped them heal as they kind of go through their process. And our guest today is one such person. Longtime cannabis advocate, passionate as I am to educate people about the plant and kind of bring it into more diverse communities, which is also really important, not just for the social equity component, but to acknowledge the diversity of people who can benefit from cannabis. He is the founder of Cassidy Consulting, and he is also a survivor of a brainstem stroke, currently on a journey of recovery, and is doing, his focus is more on the recovery right now than on the business side. But either way, he is doing a lot in terms of the furthering the cannabis mission, and he's doing a lot to kind of heal himself and get back to 100% right now using cannabis in terms of its wellness and holistic approach to healing. So, listener, please welcome with me my guest today, Ian McGann, founder of Cassidy Consulting. Welcome, Ian. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate the intro. I think you covered a lot of bases with that intro, and I really appreciate the kind words. I think first I want to just say I'm grateful to be here today, alive, coming on your podcast to talk about this. I have the utmost gratitude that I'm here in round 2 with a stronger voice. And it literally, thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. And I believe me, like I know I kind of alluded to it at the top there, but seeing as you are in the midst of recovery, why don't we start with just your journey and tell us about, your health concerns and how the stroke came about and how your recovery's going.
Yeah, so it's deep. All of it's deep. The story's intertwined and a lot of things dovetail together. So let's start the night of the stroke. We'll just say this. I had a premonition. I knew I was going to have one. And I told my wife 3 weeks before, I think, or something like that, to be ready. And it happened. I had a right vertebral artery dissection. So what they came to find out is the right artery in the back of my neck had burst under, we'll call it trauma at this point, and it, as it was trying to close and clot, it threw a clot on the inside of the artery. That clot traveled up to the brainstem, specifically the pons region of the brain at the very base of the brainstem, and it's kind of like plumbing, Don, where plumbing comes into a house. You have the main that comes in, and then it branches out as soon as it hits the house, and it goes all over the place. That's where the blood clot lodged. Yeah, so it was gnarly, dude.
I can't imagine. And so, tell me, but the premonition that you mentioned, you tell your wife 3 weeks before this happened. What made you think that this was coming for you?
I can't. I don't have that answer, dude. I don't have that answer. Let's say a deep knowing, all things spiritual. I'm not 100% if I'll ever know the root of that. However, it helped my wife save my life.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I can imagine. She took you seriously in that warning.
So we don't really have the time today for the full story. It takes me like an hour and a half to tell the whole thing, and it's wild. They almost crashed the ambulance, 2 wheels, the whole,
wow.
It was a complete and utter shit show, man. I'm telling you, dude.
Oh my God.
It was wild. So the funny part is, it blocked my brainstem. 100% blockage for 6 hours, dude.
Oh.
Do you know what that does to your brain? It's just wild.
I know it's not good. That's all I know.
Yeah. So I'm, can I speak freely, dude?
Please.
Okay. I'm vomiting. I'm defecating. I'm urinating. It is horrible at the time of the stroke. And it is everywhere. My wife's flipping me up on the side. 911's telling her to, because I'm aspirating at the time on my vomit and blah blah. It's like a war scene. I mean, horrible.
Yeah.
The EMS gets here, and I swear, the smell of I just smoked a bowl, man. It was 6 o'clock. No, it was about 9 o'clock on Saturday, the Saturday night Memorial Day weekend. We had just smoked a bowl, typical 40-something. My wife was going to bed. I was going outside to eat a Kit Kat, look at the stars, and then just, catch up with her in a second.
Sure.
Man, it hit outside. The world started to spin like something that I had never experienced. It was the craziest, and then I went down this, like, just deep path of going into a more stroke state, where I eventually got into a locked-in state. Don, have you ever heard of those people in a coma that can hear and perceive information but cannot blink, can't talk? It's called locked in.
Okay.
Dude, I experienced that during the period of the stroke, from when the stroke started and I had the emergency brain surgery. And these individuals didn't treat me because of the cannabis. They chalked up the situation to an overdose.
Oh, no.
Dude, 6 hours, bro.
Oh my God. It's unbelievable that you are sitting here talking to me right now. And I got to say, because this is an audio podcast listener, Ian, you look good. You got a good haircut going. Your tan is good. I would never have guessed that this was your reality as recent as it was. And so you talk about the full blockage and the 6 hour time period. I know, and anybody who's familiar at all with strokes knows how the timeline is critical in terms of healing. So that's a long time to be without oxygen and blood to the brain.
Don, you hit the nail on the head. The irony of this, my wife was forced to sit in the waiting room because the hospital that I was taken to initially would not let her back because we have different last names.
Oh.
So I'm back there, initially put in the hallway, naked, in my own feces.
Oh my God.
Not completely understanding what's going on.
Yeah.
She sits down in the hospital waiting room next to a table, and it has stroke pamphlets laying out, and it says, "Stroke? ? Time is of the essence. Act fast." And she's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Right,
like,
right.
The whole entire time, she had told the EMS, 911, and the first hospital that I was having a stroke. From the get-go. Showing them, and it was like, "Where's the heroin? Are you sure he's not on opiates?" And like, thank you for saying the thing earlier. I am very well aware that I look clean cut,
Yeah.
If this shit can happen to me,
Right.
I'm the white construction worker, American flag truck, on 5 acres, a nice home, a beautiful wife. And they were just like, boom, label. Your life's not worth saving.
Yeah, right. That little piece that you mentioned, that they let the 6 hours went by because they made an assumption that your symptoms were due to your cannabis use. And then even after the fact, when it's not that, they're looking for things like heroin or opiate use, basically trying to identify a drug cause of the stroke that you were currently going through. So let's, obviously they treated you at some point, and let's, you're a cannabis user before this happens. You mentioned you're outside kind of smoking a bowl and whatnot. How long have you been a cannabis user in your life, would you say?
Have you seen Half Baked?
Oh, only 100 times.
Okay. So, yeah, man, that's a loaded question. I would say my entire life. And this kind of brings me into some stuff that the stroke has gifted me. And that is the complete dissolution of my ego for a period of 4 months. And I got to mentally separate between what was accepted dogmatic biases and scripts within my internal dialogue against like that. I don't know when you were born, but I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s.
Same.
War on drugs was strong. I hate looking over my fucking shoulder for something that makes me feel so darn good and does so, and like, if anything needs to be reprogrammed, that doesn't need to occur. That is like mental programming of the dogmatic systems. And with the instantaneous droppage of my ego, I was able to experience a period of life with that. I was also handed a ungodly large challenge,
Sure.
However, I really try to focus on the positive stuff. So this has also been a liberating experience for me with how I view cannabis internally on a deeper level. And recognizing what stems from others. Hold on. If I slur or lose my spot, it's residual. I'm not drunk.
Yeah. No, you got it.
I haven't drank in 2 years.
Yeah.
So.
No. And like we said, you're still kind of, like I mentioned at the top, you're still recovering from the stroke itself. You're not back to work yet. You're still very much in the process on the road to recovery. So I totally get you there.
Yeah. So I was reading a book afterwards, very early in my recovery, Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. And there's a chapter where Ram Dass, the spiritual guru, talks about his experience with a stroke and ego death. And it was such an enlightening moment when I read that, because I knew I was going through something. Like, you can't just talk to anybody about this stuff and have them either look at you with like 3 heads or be like, oh yeah, you go to so it's like, who do you turn to?
Right.
And I, synchronous, like, just happened to be reading this book, and he explained it, and it was that aha, like, oh my gosh, as a part of this crazy challenge I was given, I also got to see the separation of the veil of beliefs and what's like true with your soul. I don't know, what level of spirituality you are, or even if you aren't, and it doesn't matter. But I speak from my experience personally.
Yeah.
And it's been a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
I asked for a challenge, and I got handed my own personal Mount Everest, dude.
Yeah, for sure. And I get that. And I take your question about the spirituality thing. It's meaningful to me too. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I was born in 87. So I grew up at the, we're same kind of age range here. And I talk all the time on the show about the DARE education and the part that they played in the continual brainwashing about, the propaganda of cannabis and all these things. And so I think we experienced a lot of the same things growing up. But the spirituality you're talking about in reading this book at the time that you were reading it, I'm a big proponent of the timing of the information we get and how impactful it is based on whether we're ready for it or not. One of the for me, I grew up hearing people talk about meditation and more spirituality and stuff in yoga. And I always, my family, I was raised Catholic, but my family wasn't really that spiritual and really looking outside of like the Catholic faith for stuff like that. But when I was early in radio, we had this media guy on, Dan Harris, who wrote a book called 10% Happier. And he came at it from a journalistic standpoint, talked all about his 2-year journey, interviewing people, the gurus, the people that were all in the news, writing books, talking about meditation. And he tried to parse what was real from what was just kind of like being sold as this is how meditation can solve all your problems, now buy my book. But he was like, the reality is somewhere in there, and the title of the book being 10% Happier, his notion was that what I take from it is that the reality, not just somebody trying to sell you a product, but meditation can make you 10% happier. And the reason I bring this up to you now, Ian, is because when I was reading that book at the time, as much as I'd heard about meditation before that, my mind was open enough. And I was smoking myself at the time. I was really in my mid-20s, kind of just looking at the world, thinking about what life has to offer and such. That was the right time for me to absorb that message, and I've been meditating ever since then. It's been a little over a decade, and I just do it like 10 minutes a day after a workout or something. But that message in that book changed my life because of the time at which I read it. And it sounds a little bit like you're sort of voicing that same message, that you were hit by something, and it all had to do with the time that you were reading this. You were open to such a message, it sounds like, at that moment.
I couldn't agree with you more, dude. I have a few kind of verbiage things that I refer to it through, that I picked up on the path that I'm on. It can be referred to as divine bridge of incidents, synchronicities,
Yep.
faith.
Sure.
I think we all the different structures have a word for it, The one thing that's constant is a deep knowing of truthful information being passed on. And I try to say this without putting any of my beliefs or other structures on it, so that it's as close to my truth and experience as I can relay. And I was raised Presbyterian, I think baptized Catholic maybe, and I am I don't go to church like we had in the 90s, Sundays, Easter and Christmas,
totally.
The Christmas Eve service, and
same.
And it's not because it's not sacred, man. I don't do it because it just hasn't resonated with me. I'm a nature guy, I experience the divine in many different ways and all the time in life. I do yoga daily. I meditate. I get out in nature and, talk to plants,
Sure.
I see the need for all of it. But yeah, synchronicities. I am a deep believer in paying attention to those moments, to the thoughts that you're having in those moments, to what's going on. And I believe they're important, and they can aid you on your specific path and journey depending upon how you're, interpreting them. And a lot of times, if you're careful with your perspective, and not allowing others' beliefs to infiltrate it, I think that's the closest you can get to the truth. And that's a good segue to link back to when I did not have the structure of the ego. I had complete unfiltered truth from God, source, universe, whatever, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see, I didn't care ever how anybody looked at me for the stigma of cannabis. And Don, before my stroke, I didn't openly share that I used it.
For sure.
And, I didn't share that it's a tool. I didn't share my love for it.
Right.
I always had to hide it. And it's freaking nuts.
Yeah. It's the stigma. It's the stigma that we still deal with. I totally get you. It's like that scarlet letter. You know what I mean? Like you're walking around the world, and when you tell people, and this is still the case, I think that even as cannabis is getting legalized, it's stuff I talk about a lot on the show, even though more states now, we're just at about half the country of America recreational states.
Thank you.
And medically 38, so well over halfway. But because it's still Schedule 1, because the DEA is still out there repeating last century's propaganda, this stigma still exists. And a lot of the guests I've talked to on here talk about how successful the brainwashing campaign of the last 100 years just about has been. So the stigma you're talking about is real. Even me doing this show right now, there are people out there where it's like they look at me a different way. The jokes that kind of come with like admitting that you're a cannabis user, and yet if you say that you drink alcohol, totally normal. If you, for a long time, if you were a cigarette smoker, no big deal. If you're hooked on sugar, you're just like everybody else. Caffeine, cup of coffee in the morning, same addiction as we all have. But when you talk about cannabis, or you step outside of that pre-prescribed, lane that it's all okay that we're in, then you kind of get into this, like you said, the looks that you get, or that stigma. But it's really important conversations like these, you sharing your story, stuff like this can let people in on what cannabis is really about. Not just the message that we were pushed back in the 80s and 90s and all around there, but what is this plant? What can it do for people? What does it offer? And, I like to point out as well that I'm not here preaching that it's right for everybody, and I don't believe it's some panacea that's going to solve all your problems. But I do believe there's a lot of people that can benefit from it in some way, and maybe more people would give it a chance if it were more normalized, destigmatized, and the like. So let me just ask you, Ian, you're in recovery here. We're talking about this major health issue and the challenge you're facing now. Are you still using cannabis? Do you feel like it's helping you right now?
Absolutely. I don't foresee a future without it. So let's just say, all right. So that's kind of a loaded question there, Don. So I have over a year and a half of rehabs. I did 7 days in the ICU at University of Penn in Philadelphia. Then I went to Bryn Mawr Rehab Hospital in Malvern, Pennsylvania for 3 weeks, and they taught me how to walk, got most of my speech stuff pretty close, all the major things back moving. So I have to say, this part's all Ian. I went from paralyzed in half, 50% of my body, completely not able to move on day 1 after the brain surgery, to day 30, I walked out of Bryn Mawr Rehabilitation Center unassisted at my own will.
Oh my God, man. I mean, that you talk about Mount Everest for yourself. Like, that's something a lot of people can't even relate to. And you mentioned earlier about how you were locked in, where you could experience all this, but I can't imagine waking up, the day before it happens and you're all normal, and then you wake up in the ICU and half your body's paralyzed. What was, this seems, I don't want to keep asking loaded questions, but how tough was that to work back?
Don, so it was really weird because I woke up and I had to shoot Instagram stories about what was going on. And this creative outlet and tracking of it, I knew that I wanted to document everything. And I had my wife film me, and I was lifting my arm, and you could tell that the speech was just, and you could tell, I had a long road to go. That's wild. I think we need a lot more time to reflect on it. When you can't move, so I don't want to take anything away from the people that are actually truly paralyzed. I had a lack, they call it a weakened side, because I couldn't move my muscles at all on the complete right side. I mean, not even a flicker in your arm signaling that you were trying to move your fingers.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And then it was funny because when I was in Penn, dude, I've been blessed with the will of God. Thank you. I have this super, super crazy will. And there was this they had a lot of doctors. I was super young to have this thing, you know, it was very major.
Yeah.
There were like tons of doctors and they were doing a teaching thing. And I literally Kill Bill or Uma Thurman my right toe. You know the scene where she's in her casket?
Kill Bill.
She has like spider venom or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
So
you had a Kill Bill moment. Yeah.
100%. So, and I don't care if they thought it was woo-woo. I told them, they were like, try to move your toe. And I couldn't do it that time, but I had this unbelievable confidence. I knew I could do it. So I was like, hold on, back up. And I told them, and I started to talk to my toe. Big toe, we're going to move. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then I went inside and I got in and I was like, Ian, you're going to move your big toe. You're going to do. And Don, I literally focused every energetic force in my body to that toe. And it was like, blip, a little flicker of movement. And the jaws were like, oh my gosh, on the floor of the doctors trying to watch this. And I'm like, it was like doing an 8-hour masonry job.
Yeah.
Like a full day of work in that like moment. But I was like, I did it. You know, and I knew it's possible. If I could do that,
everything else can come from that. Yeah, I totally get you. That must have been such a huge moment. And with an audience, too, to kind of perform that way. But as you say, just focusing everything to do that, what a task that, you know, when you're fully healthy and you don't think about, we all move all our limbs every day. Think about the way we like gesticulate during conversations. It's just, you don't think about it at all. But when you're in that stage that you were in, it takes everything from you. You mentioned the 8-hour masonry job, like you're a construction worker. I'm sure that felt like you were all day on the site, and afterward probably just like sweating and want to collapse at home and, you know, smoke a bowl of recovery and whatnot. But you know, I wanna try and like your recovery journey is remarkable, and like we said, you're still in the midst of it here. And so you know, how long ago? You said about 1.5 years, like that the stroke happened, something like that.
So it will be 24 months on May 27th.
Right, Memorial Day you mentioned. So end of this month, you know, from when we're recording this on May 6th, it'll be a 2 years.
It stirs up a lot of stuff. I without a doubt was the receiver of medical trauma and the recipient of PTSD in the aftermath. And this is also something I want to talk about, Don. So I guess you have to go back and I had a very successful business locally. $1 million top line revenue annually. 8 to 10 employees. It was great. So I didn't talk about this stuff because of the stigma and the fear of losing clients. I mean, I was precise with who I would allow in that circle. Sure,
yeah, you're a business owner. You're not trying to turn anybody off based on your personal habits. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, so this is like this whole thing and the judgment and the clear, you know, seeing it clear as day and the bias and stuff. I vouched to myself in the moment, especially when the EMS person told me I was too dirty. Like, I vouched I would talk about this. I promised my soul I would speak up about this specific thing. So I had a very good relationship with mental health and therapy. pre-stroke. An amazing relationship. I'm talking 15 years of every other week professional counseling.
Wow.
And I would use it to dial in relationships. Hold on a sec. I'm having a wave of pain. Give me a second.
Yeah, take your time.
I would use it to help me dial in my personal relationships with clients, with employees, my day-to-day, my wife,
Sure.
and self-talk, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a very unique position post-stroke. When it came back around and the magnitude of the situation and the ego came back, I had so much trauma to unpack. This is like the 6-month mark. And I realized that the way that I did it before was to ask for help.
Mm.
And one of these synchronicities, I ran into a friend of mine, and I was having a down day, and she told me about a program she did to help her out with a car accident she had. An intensive outpatient trauma program. And I say, in life, when the answer is a resounding yes, you need to run forward. Run towards that resounding yes every freaking time. Man, that was a resounding yes. I called instantly. Insurance covered it. I got in. Like, my wife calls it the diva package. It all lined up. It all lined up. And
Yeah.
I was over there, and it was, I'll tell you what, for another 40-year-old white male, it might have been a little bit harder. But because I had been broken open so fucking hard, I was there with 7 other females in a group every day, and they were fucking awesome, dude.
That's great.
They were awesome.
Yeah.
And about 3 weeks into it, it was too much, man. I opened up the floodgates. When you're dying and people refuse to help you because of how dirty you are, or they refuse to ride in the back of the ambulance with you because you stink and they're afraid to get feces on them.
Mm-hmm.
During those moments of just unknown, it leaves leaves some scar tissue for you to dig through.
Yeah, I totally get that. You're left feeling like less than, or like you're not worth it, or something like that. I know what you mean, and I'm glad you found a group like that. You talk about the resounding yes. I do think that that's a great just mantra to have in life, because we all make decisions every day, hundreds of them. We ask ourselves a question, yes or no. And I love the way that you put that. I also agree. I kind of think that when you're looking for direction in life, follow the hell yes, because it's like that'll point you in the direction that your internal voice is trying to help you go to. And this is an important conversation to have, and I really appreciate you sharing your story like this,
I need to say something even deeper, and this gets into why we need to talk about this, because there are people out there that need help, and they may be not wanting to give up a tool to get the help. And that's something that I'd like to see change. I was willing to give up the tool to go get the help. So 3 weeks into the intensive outpatient program, I started to experience some suicidal ideation at that time.
Yeah.
Not f***ing cool. Not f***ing cool. And I flipped the script, and I said yes to go down to a place in Florida called the Refuge for PTSD and medical trauma. 90 acres, horse farm. It's almost like summer camp for like trauma.
Yeah.
And FYI, the stroke did something with the body temperature regulation part of my brain. So anything under 60 or 65 is not cool.
No good.
So the chance to go to Florida and deal with this stuff, another resounding yes.
For sure.
Now, that was hard. I will say, as someone who's had robots help them learn how to re-walk and use their arms and stuff, that was harder. The mental health side was insanely harder, and I am so grateful I had the opportunity, the insurance, the tribe of refugees at the refuge, the groups, all of it, man. I'm so grateful. However, with that being said, cannabis clashes in that type of environment. And there are a lot of people going through suffering who need to get that help too, man.
Yeah. I get that, like sort of in a therapeutic environment like that, especially one where you're talking about dealing with the trauma, the mental side of it versus just the physical of relearning like emotions and actions and whatnot. It's not the same mentally. And I think I get what you're saying where that like professional, help in that regard, doctors, therapists, they may not want you to be using cannabis or clouding your mind or like sort of using the, for lack of a better term, crutch that we sometimes use it as mentally. They might not want you to lean on that when you're doing this mental work. Is that like a fair statement?
That's correct. And I'm 100% okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist.
Right.
And I have not had the educational background. I don't know it. I know from lived experiences. However, there's still, I want to make sure I word this correctly. There's still a feeling of it only leads to death and jail from some of those dogmatic therapy structures.
Yep.
And that's not fucking fair.
Right.
I know that's not the truth. And that's also preventing others from getting help, because why would you? I'm very courageous, and like I said, I have the will of God. I put myself into this situation because I could deal with it and come back, and I knew that I needed to address this heavy. So this was the rehab that I went to was for substance abuse, religious trauma, medical trauma, sexual abuse, combat veterans, PTSD. So it was eating disorders, everything that life can freaking throw at you.
Yeah.
And there is, there's still a discussion in that forum that you can't be sober and use cannabis, or and like that just clashes with, well you're taking Zoloft, or you're taking Klonopin, or you're taking this to deal with that, or Adderall to deal with your chronic fatigue, and like none of these are bad per se.
Right.
They're all helpful tools.
Mm-hmm.
They can also have the adverse side, so like,
certainly.
I think the blank labels, it's keeping some people out from getting some real help.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Ian, because I think what you're getting at now is this issue about how the lingering stigma we've talked about still bleeds into therapy. Because I subscribe to therapy too, even certainly in a situation like yours, but even like the day-to-day stuff of, dealing with stresses, whether, a not fun coworker, family drama, whatever, or relationships, negative thought patterns. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might seek out therapy, and it can be very beneficial. But in the West here, in the United States, we have these big pharmaceutical industries, and the fact that these therapists are okay with prescribing some of the substances that you just mentioned that come in pill bottles, and yet they're vehemently opposed to cannabis because you're in an altered state and they feel like you can't do the work you need to do mentally when you're on it, and yet they'll then shove 6 pill bottles across the table to be like, well, these will help you deal with all those symptoms. But it's kind of like, well, why are those okay, but not the plant that I know does help me with certain things? And on this topic, Ian, I know that there are people out there who are starting to experiment with using cannabis in therapy in some of these ways we're talking about. And I'm really hopeful that they're able to kind of further that drive forward, because it's important for people to take on therapy and do the mental and physical work necessary to heal, but also acknowledge that maybe cannabis can be helpful in that regard when prescribed a certain way versus only taking you out of the work that you need to be done. The attitude that we've had up until now, that somehow it gets in the way of the therapy. And I know all therapists are different and stuff too, but I think that your experience here really highlights something that is one of the many facets of cannabis and society that we're exploring right now as it's becoming more legalized. And I'm glad people are doing that work,
Thanks, man. It's not easy to talk about this shit. You can't look at my experience and tell me I'm not supposed to talk about this because of what I've been put through the gamut.
Totally.
And I want to be crystal clear about this. I'm a both kind of guy when it comes to the pharmaceuticals and cannabis. I don't think anybody should up and flip and be like, I'm doing it this way. And
totally.
There are people that need cannabis, and there are people that need pharmaceuticals, and there are people that need both.
Yep.
You need to figure out what's right for you, and I don't give any medical advice. I do me.
Yeah, that's agreed. And I appreciate you clarifying, because I feel the same way, even though I talk about this a lot on the show. Obviously not a doctor, not telling anybody what's right for them. You should follow medical advice here. But I just think that what we're talking about, Ian, that's an important thing to make. You can do both. It doesn't have to be like one or the other. I do think that you follow the advice of trusted medical professionals and you do you, but there is a world where maybe both can exist in the same person, and that's okay.
So, yeah, I agree with you 100%, and maybe it's part of a goal with you, transitioning to one way or the other.
Sure.
Maybe you're trying to go to pharmaceuticals. I don't freaking know. Walking the complete sobriety path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe you're trying to go natural. And it's a combination until then. Whatever blows your hair back. That's the way I am. Right?
Right. Life's too short. You know what I mean? And it's just and that really just kind of brings us back to obviously your recovery and what you've been going through. And like I said before, I really appreciate you sharing this story. It's an important one. And you're in Pennsylvania. We're talking about this. We're doing this conversation May 6th, and I just read, I think yesterday, that there's movement for medical cannabis and another vote coming in
for rec,
for recreational. Is there a medical program in Pennsylvania?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty good, and if the legislators are listening, I could give them a few pointers. But
sure.
Yeah.
I do have listeners in Philly and in other parts of Pennsylvania too, so hopefully some of them catch this. Yeah.
I could. You can't see the product beforehand, so it's, packaging really controlled. And that, obviously depends what kind of person you are or how deep you're into it, but it is nice to see the strain and blah, 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 blah.
Totally. Yeah, I do agree with that. I know why they went so clinical in the med places, because it's like to deal with the stigma. They want to make it seem like it's very professional and normal, but that keeping everything behind the locked door and then they just bring you the bag out like a pharmacy, like a prescription thing.
It enforces the narrative.
A little bit. And I agree with you that it's whether you're super into the plant or not, it's always nice to see it a little bit ahead of time, maybe get a feel of it before you're walking out of the store. I feel the same way.
Don, the one thing I really want to drop, I want to say this. One, to bring awareness to it, not that we don't already know, but I just want to shine the light on it. And I'm proud of this. I have gone the almost 2 years without taking painkillers for any of the any opiate. Sorry, I took one morphine once in an ER situation I had when I was in rehab. But for the whole freaking thing, and I'm telling you, they offered me Demerol, they offered me Percocet, Oxycontin, but I mean everything.
Right, the best the best Western medicine was on the table for you.
I'm in tears, dude. In this, the pain is like, oh my gosh. I only took Tylenol. Fucking Tylenol.
Yeah, right.
And I would get these waves of pain when I was in one of the rehabs, and they would come at the 3 o'clock mark, 3 o'clock in the morning. The nurse would come bring me the Tylenol, and I was so aware it would take about 15 minutes before it would slice into the pain, and I would go through my phone Rolodex, and I would think of the people I know who own businesses or get up early, and I would call them and use them as a coping mechanism, as distraction until the pain, because in the rehab facilities, in healthcare, because of the federal regs, I was not allowed to use cannabis for pain management. Dude. Oh.
Brutal.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
We need to change that now.
Yep.
I don't care if it's a gummy. I don't care if they don't want you to smoke. Whatever.
Right. Suppository. I don't care. Like, however it gets in, whatever.
Doesn't matter, dude. And I was like, just give me the cream. Give me Dr. Solomon's. And, and they were like, no. And I filmed all of it. I had bouts where I was just in tears, and I had to mentally rehearse that I was a strong human being. Verbally say it and mentally rehearse.
Yeah.
And
that's
it was gnarly.
It's awful, man. And it gets to the Schedule 1 status under the Controlled Substances Act that cannabis is still under right now. Yep. Again, recording this in May, they were supposed to have an administrative hearing in January on rescheduling, got booted. Hopefully it ends up happening. I'm not holding my breath, but the Schedule 1 means they do not acknowledge any medical value to cannabis, and I've repeated this on the show a lot. I've had a lot of guests say it. The government owns patents on various cannabis uses and all of this. 38 states have legalized medically for the various benefits medically that have been proven. We can't walk with feet down in both of these lanes. The hypocrisy is undeniable. And what you're talking about here is the medical value that we know exists in cannabis, and it should be allowed in rehab facilities for these reasons.
I agree. I mean, I agree with you, Dom. So part of my journey was walking out of there in 30 days, looking in the mirror, saying my I am affirmations. I am going to, and watching people and the power of your belief and your mind and manifestation and all that stuff. These people watched me, stood me up in front of the mirror in my bathroom every morning, and I would do I am affirmations. And I did it. I walked out of there on the date, Babe Ruth. I called my shot.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. However, it would have been a lot easier without so much freaking pain,
Sure.
I took one for the team. And when I got out, right back there. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And I, again, people don't often look up close to these situations that you went through, Ian. And I think for a lot of reasons we've talked about in this conversation, because it can be hard to look at. I think there's a lot of people that don't like hospitals at all just because of the real messiness that humanity can be when you get down to it. We're meat sacks and we're machines made of blood and bone. And it's just like when something goes wrong or there's these issues, it's like... Yeah. It's messy, it's gnarly, like you're talking about, and I think a lot of people would just rather, aside from doctors, aside from therapists, most people just don't want to be aware of it. They're like, hey, I'll come see you when you're back home or whatever. But but you giving these details, you sharing people what your actual experience was without any censorship, with letting people know the Instagram filming, having your wife look at you when you're in those really rough moments. There are no better examples, I think. There's no better way to really show people the relief and the power that cannabis can kind of offer than when you're going through something like that.
Don, let me just let this one reach, come from the mountains. Put me in, coach. I literally DM'd GTI. I'm like, yo, I used your products, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm the perfect spokesperson.
Yeah.
I am so serious. There is a lot in health, and I knew a lot about healthcare too. The integration of the two zones. I'm telling you, I'm a great spokesperson. I'm asking for people to say, how'd you do it? You know? We saw you walk in 30 days. How'd you do it? We saw you rebuild your 3-4 month long stints at outpatient every day. You rebuilt everything cognitively. You rebuilt vestibular. You're still doing it. Daily, every single day. You're not every single day. Sorry, it's not a linear path. I have to be honest about that. Recovery, while mine has gone drastically up, it is not a linear path.
Sure.
Got to be true about that.
And it's going to be different for everybody. And like you said, some days are going to be better, more productive than other days. You're going to have setbacks.
Yeah.
But it still matters. And this is why, I know, as I said before, you're still on this recovery journey, and it's really important. And I think myself and anybody listening, I'm sure, is rooting for you, Ian, that this continues to go well for you. But I think we're also looking forward to you getting back on the horse with Cassidy Consulting and with you being able to do exactly what you're talking about here, which is share your story with more people and just kind of paint this picture and be an example for all those out there who might benefit from your story.
Yeah, sign me up, Coach. I'm ready to do that, and I really want to help people with that. I think that it can have... I was handed such a gnarly story. It's so gnarly, and I really think it can benefit people globally, and I want to be the bearer of that torch.
Right on, dude.
No, for real, dude. I really do. I want to help people.
I think you already are, and I believe that you're going to continue to do that in the days ahead. And I could certainly talk with you about this all day, and I definitely want to have you on again in the future, Ian. But for now, Ian McGann, founder of Cassidy Consulting and survivor of a brainstem stroke and advocate for cannabis, thank you a lot for stopping by today, sharing your story, and just kind of telling the people an important message.
Thank you for the platform. Thank you to your listeners, who have made it this far in the podcast. And,
yeah.
I hope they enjoyed it. I really, I'll try to be true and, me.
And there you have it, listener. I want to thank again my guest, Ian McGann, for just kind of going through what he went through and really just committing so strongly to his recovery. I'm telling you, he looks great. It was really awesome to talk with him. I think his perspective is invaluable, meaning it's priceless for somebody to have gone through what he did and to be on the other side of it now, still recovering, as we say, but for him to be looking as good as he is and talking how he is, and here we are just about about 2 years later, kudos to you, man. And he is making this effort, not just, it's not just enough for him to still be here. He is committed to spreading the word about the power of cannabis. And I just really want to give him a round of applause for that. Really inspiring story. And I just wanted to say we're all pulling for you, Ian. Just keep up, stay strong, my man, and keep with the recovery. I hope it continues to pan out for you the way that it obviously has. Now I'd like to move on to some news headlines that I think are worth your attention. Gonna rifle through a few of these. I've linked all of these below, so if there's any article that you want more details on, you can follow along with me. You can read them for yourself. I usually don't go through the entirety of them on the show here. I just kind of give you the gist of the story, and you can, find out more for yourself. I also encourage you to click on these links and support these publications that I share with you, because they do great work, and journalism is really important, and people aren't going to be covering this stuff in the detail unless we support the work that they're doing by getting eyeballs on this content here. And so let's start here in the U.S. Arizona regulators flagged some major violations, multiple violations at a major testing lab for cannabis. This is something that also came up here in Chicago. There was a huge scandal here. One of the most prolific testing labs in the region was also flagged for some inaccurate results, some flawed testing methods, and it seems now this one in Arizona has gone through the same thing. Reading the article here, which is from MJ Biz Daily and published by Chris Roberts May 12th, so just a few days ago, a prominent national marijuana testing lab is in hot water with state regulators in Arizona who have found fault with the lab's ability to detect contaminants and flag hemp-derived THC, public records show. Following annual inspections in March, the Arizona Department of Health Services on April 24th informed Kaycha Labs, Kaycha, of more than a dozen alleged deficiencies, including problems with the lab's potency testing and pesticide and microbial detection methods. It's the latest example of regulators taking action against a cannabis testing lab for potential failures to detect contaminants and produce reliable potency results after years of complaints of questionable lab results from across the industry. California regulators in April suspended at least 2 labs' permits to operate, the latest in a crackdown that started last year. And that enforcement comes amid claims from operators in states such as Colorado and New York that unscrupulous parties are introducing hemp-derived THC oil produced outside regulated channels into the legal cannabis supply chain, an example of the practice known as inversion. That's all I'm going to read of the article. Again, I've linked it below. There is more there. I encourage you to check that out. That really just speaks to sort of the regulation and this weird hodgepodge legal status that cannabis is under right now. Schedule 1 and federally prohibited, and yet different states have their own legal markets. And so just like a lot of the other laws, each state is kind of its own island, and they have to do their own lab testing. And this just goes to show that not every state is able to put the kind of resources or the kind of regulation and oversight that's critical to make sure that these results are consistent and reliable across the state lines. Moving on to the next article, this one from marijuanamoment.net, one of my favorite publications. They do really good work here. There is a federal science agency that says, according to this headline, cannabis industry should develop more, quote, consistent drying methods. This was published May 13th, so yesterday from when I'm recording this, by Ben Adlin. A new report from a federal science agency examines moisture and drying standards in hemp, part of an ongoing project to help labs ensure accuracy and precision when testing cannabis products. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, published the report late last month, finding considerable variation in moisture levels from facilities that use different approaches to drying. The agency said the results indicate, quote, the need for consistent hemp drying methods for accurate and precise measurements. The 29-page paper is the latest in NIST's so-called Cannabis Laboratory Quality Assurance Program, or CANA-QAP, CANA-CAP, I guess, launched in 2020. The program's most recent prior report, published last year, focused on determining cannabinoid content in plant material samples, following earlier reports on moisture content and certain toxins and heavy metals. This was created after the 2018 Farm Bill's federal legalization of hemp, something I've addressed on the show at length, and it's split into 3 exercises. The first is centered on measuring the concentration of up to 17 different cannabinoids in hemp oil. NIST published a report on that segment in mid-2021. Exercise 2, completed last year, looked at testing of dried cannabis plant samples rather than hemp oil. In addition to cannabinoid testing, it expanded the scope of the exercise to include testing for moisture content as well as 13 toxic elements. And this new paper is the first portion of exercise 3 of CannaCap. In addition to the latest report on moisture in cannabis, exercise 3 will also include additional forthcoming reports on testing for cannabinoids and toxic elements. An NIST representative told Marijuana Moment that 2 final reports could be published by the end of the year, but more likely sometime in 2026. That is a quote, and that is all of this article that I'm going to read. There's plenty more here, and again, I encourage you to read it for yourself. But this kind of falls in with the last article about consistency. If measurements are inaccurate, which we have shown that they are, not just for potency, but things like toxic elements, the drying methods of these impact the testing. That just makes sense. And so finding consistent drying methods so that the tests can be run consistently is going to make for some consistent results. And all of that is important for monitoring and oversight so that, as we say, the stuff on the shelves of dispensaries is reliably clean of toxic elements and exactly the stuff that it says it is on those nutrition labels. Next article here from Cannabis.net, a blog that I really enjoy. This one was published by Dana Smith on May 9th. Headline reads, "Forget brain quizzes. Cannabis could be the key to preventing cognitive decline," says new groundbreaking study. Now, the article is a lengthy one. I'm going to kind of jump around just a little bit to give you the gist of this, but she explains cognitive decline is the gradual decrease in mental functioning as we get older. It affects many significant cognitive tasks that we use on a daily basis. These are things like reasoning, processing, attention, and memory. The rate at which these functions decrease in efficiency, severity, that varies from one person to another. Though, as she says, it's inevitable that everyone will be affected by it at some point. She points out that it occurs due to many biological changes that happen in the body as a result of aging, particularly when the neurons in your brain also age. That leads, as we know, to slower processing times as we struggle to process new information. Hormonal changes also impact this. She points out this is part of the reason why we lose our independence as we get older. And I think a lot of us find that thought to be a little frightening. But she points out here, did you know that alongside living a healthy lifestyle from a young age, cannabis consumption can help? A groundbreaking, large study whose results were published last year analyzed more than 5,000 men in Denmark for over 40 years to examine the long-term effects of cannabis consumption. The study was also supported through data provided by the National Institute on Drug Abuse and led by a public health scientist, Christine Marup Hoeg. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. They also utilized military intelligence tests to measure cognitive function at 2 different periods, early adulthood and then later in midlife. It was interesting, she says, to find that the men with a history of cannabis consumption displayed less cognitive decline when they were studied at both points in life compared to those men who did not use cannabis. The investigators took into account different health and lifestyle factors, which may affect IQ scores such as tobacco smoking, binge drinking, and education level, yet the findings were the same. Cannabis users showed less cognitive decline compared to non-users. The researchers also found there was no association between the frequency of cannabis use and with the age of their first consumption. These factors also did not lead to more cognitive decline, which dispels the theories that early cannabis use speeds up cognitive decline. As many scientists will always say in their conclusions, further studies are needed to investigate whether these findings reflect that there are no adverse effects on cognitive decline or that the effects of cannabis are temporary inventory and disappear after a prolonged period of time. End quote from the authors there. She goes on to highlight some similar studies, but that's all I'm going to read of this article. Again, very much encourage you to finish that for yourself. And then ICBC, the International Cannabis Business Conference, .com here, they have a headline, this article written by Johnny Green, May 9th as well. A Swiss study finds legal cannabis access reduces, quote, problematic consumption. I thought this was interesting for a couple of reasons, but we'll start with the article. Roughly 2 years ago, Switzerland launched what was then a unique approach to science-based cannabis commerce research. The European nation launched the first of what was eventually become a series of regional adult-use cannabis commerce pilot trials, which involve permitting local production and sales of recreational cannabis products. Pilot trials now also operate in the Netherlands and are part of Germany's legalization model, although pilot trials have yet to launch in Germany due to various reasons, mostly political. That is me editorializing, but that is why those various reasons of Germany are holding that process up. Back to the article, whereas current EU agreements prohibit national adult use cannabis sales like those found in Canada, the agreements do permit member nations to conduct research that is focused on improving public health outcomes, which is the goal of pilot research trials. An interdisciplinary research team affiliated with the addiction department of the Department of Health of the Canton of Basel-Stadt, the University of Basel, and Psychiatric Services, Aargau, recently published findings from a study that relied on data from the Weed Care pilot trial project in Switzerland. The researchers detail a lot of what went into their study, their methods, what they found, what was measured specifically, but here is the real takeaway here. And again, read this all for yourself. I've linked it below. But the key takeaway for me is this. Quote, public health-oriented recreational cannabis access may decrease cannabis use and cannabis-related harms, especially among those using other drugs. Furthermore, the study was able to dispel fears that legalization could exacerbate the psychopathological symptoms associated with cannabis consumption in addition to consumption itself. After the first 6 months, there was no difference between the two study groups in terms of depression, anxiety, or other symptoms. That's all I'm going to read of this article for a few different reasons, but I thought it was worth bringing to your attention because this is something that I think has been shown across legal zones of cannabis where it's recreationally legal. In addition to reducing rates of alcohol consumption, because that is another thing that seems to be true across the board. Wherever cannabis is recreationally legalized for those 21 and up, people seem to drink less alcohol. And this study, as far as I can parse that science jargon there, and, I hope you'll forgive me for that. I always try and make sense of this and break it down into layman's terms, but sometimes it's honestly beyond me. But my takeaway from this is that in addition to lowering alcohol consumption, legal cannabis access reduces consumption of other drugs, including cannabis, which is kind of remarkable. I mean, you would think that when cannabis is legalized somewhere, people are, the people who love it are just going to go break the doors down and just be doing it all the time. This Swiss study found that is not the case at all. I think, this is my theory, this has nothing to do with their conclusions of this study. I think that when people get legal access to cannabis, it further normalizes consumption of the plant, and they fold it in to the regular routine of their lives, which is something that they weren't able to do as much when it was illegal for them. Think about it this way. When you had to pick up from your dealer, when it was illegal, black market only, and you had to order your cannabis from your plug, you could only consume based on when your plug was available and what they had. And so there were times that your plug didn't have anything, or maybe they didn't have what you wanted. This, I think, again, this is just me here, I believe that contributes to a kind of binge consumption model. Because when you want cannabis and you can't have it, and then your dealer shows up when he gets it again, you're going to dive in with both feet to whatever you pick up. You're going to consume more of it and ultimately burn through your supply and ultimately have to go back to the dealer, who may or may not have more for you. But either way, the unreliability of that supply, the fact, even if you have a dealer who almost always had it, maybe you were lucky enough to live on a block where a guy was growing it himself and you always had access to it. I think, this is just a theory, you can tell me what you think about this, but I believe that if you like cannabis, if your supply was ever in question, it contributes to this binge consumption model. When cannabis is legalized and available for you at any dispensary and it's regulated and all that, after 6 months, I think the novelty of being able to run to the dispensary every weekend and just, blow your paycheck on it and consume as much as you want, I think that novelty fades. And then most people consume it at a sort of routine or normalized rate. I guess my ultimate point, your consumption falls to the baseline of whatever that would be when you know it's always there for you reliably. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Again, that's just my theory. It has nothing to do with the conclusions of this Swiss study, which I have linked below for your own perusal there. But let me know what you think about that. And I mentioned on last week's episode that I changed hosting platforms from Buzzsprout over to Libsyn. I know that changed the ability to text. That link to text Cannabis Man is no longer there. So I have activated a Google Voice number, which you can call and leave a voicemail, or you can text and let me know your thoughts about the findings of this study, any of the other news topics I covered here, and my theory about access reducing consumption to a baseline. The number is 872-269-2403. 872-269-2403. Call or text, leave a voicemail. I've also linked it below. It's in the description notes. That is the method to get a hold of the show going forward. No more link of text Cannabis Man in the description notes. Just call or text that number. And finally, last thing I want to say here on the news front, there's an article from greenstate.com. You can now submit your nominations for the Green State Consumers' Choice Awards. This article was put out yesterday, and they are introducing, this is a new award ceremony here, the Consumers' Choice Awards from Green State, celebrating the top products, dispensaries, and people shaping the industry. Presented by your trusted source for cannabis news and lifestyle content, the Green State Consumers' Choice Awards lets you make your voice heard. The nomination round, you can submit your nominations now from May 13th through the 30th. The voting round is June 9th through the 25th. And you can nominate your favorites once a day, every day. There's various regions. The country's broken up into the Northeast, the South, Midwest, Northwest, and Southwest. I have linked this article below. You can submit in this article. If you click on it and scroll down, there's a link as to where you can add your nomination. And you have until May 30th to do that. And hey, if you feel like nominating the Cannabis Man podcast, more power to you. I would certainly appreciate that. But I'm not soliciting any votes here. I'm just saying this possibility's there. I'm here in the Midwest. I'm here in Chicago. I'm trying to bring you news, expert conversations, product reviews. I'm just saying, if you feel like showing a little love, now you can through the Green State Consumers' Choice Awards, which again, I have linked in Article 2 below. And now, as I often do to end these episodes, after we run through some news headlines, which can often be a little depressing, especially in the cannabis space. Not so much today. I didn't find a lot of those depressing. I think we have some good stuff to look forward to here, and some positive news. But I like to end the news headline wrap-up and the episodes at large on a high note, if you will, pun intended, with the High Haiku, a 3-line poem. 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, 5 in the third. Just a very short little way of turning up the fun and ending on a nice light note. So if you've got some cannabis, spark up that joint, heat up your dab rig and drop the concentrate in that little, the little chamber there. Crack open your beverage, prepare your gummy or whichever edible you got in front of you. And let's now just take a nice deep breath in. And breathe out. and enjoy this week's High Haiku, read by my man Reg Kiefer. Take it away, Reg.
I cleaned the bong, Don. Do you see how clean that is? Oh. Breath held, but not lost. Roots cling deep through shattered stone. Still, the flower grows. Whoa. That was this week's High Haiku. Did you see how clean that bong is, Don?
Yes, I do, Reg.
Use some rubbing alcohol on that, man.
I think there's probably some better products you can use for that, but hey, you do you, man. It looks great, and the booth is still pretty smoky, so thanks for that, and thank you for reading the High Haiku, as you always do, and thank you, listener, for putting up with that and listening to this episode. I hope you made it to the end here. Maybe I'm just, by now, chatting with myself, but I hope you check this out. I hope you really liked my conversation with Ian today, Ian McGann. I found it to be an inspiring talk, and I'm rooting for Ian's continued recovery. Really good dude, and a really powerful example of what cannabis can kind of offer your life anyway, but certainly in an event like that, what it might be able to contribute to your recovery efforts too. So thanks again, Ian, for stopping by and sharing your story with us in great detail. We're all rooting for you, man. Thank you to my friends at Extract Labs for sending these delicious strawberry CBD gummies, as well as my peeps over at Tribe Tokes. They are making some wonderful stuff. That vape battery is the best I've tried. I love their cart too, and those sleep gummies are second to none. The tryptophan edition is just ingenious. It's so innovative. I love it. Remember to leave a rating or review on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, however. Any rating or review, comment on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. All of that is appreciated. And don't forget, you can now get in touch with the show anytime at the Google Voice number 872-269-2403. Send a text, leave a voicemail, and we'll get it onto the show. Have a great week and weekend, and we'll talk next week on the Cannabis Man Podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Good Son.